We are Mass Liberation Arizona, and tonight is the Pima County Attorney's Office Candidate Forum. We are going to be asking the candidates who are running for that office, when will Black Lives matter to prosecutors? We will have an opportunity in a few moments to meet those candidates. They'll do an introduction, and there's a moderator this evening who will share with you some of what to expect for the night. But I would love to just give you a brief introduction if you're not super familiar with Mass Liberation Arizona. We are a Black liberation-centered, directly impacted-led organization. We are a statewide organization. So we are in Maricopa County. We just had a forum like this last Thursday in Maricopa County. And we are also here in Pima County as well. Again, Black liberation centered, we're also directly impacted led. And so what that means is that we work with formerly and currently incarcerated folks in Arizona. And so tonight is super important to us because when Arizona is ranked 5th in the nation for incarceration rates, a large number of those people come from our very communities. We're here tonight to talk with the candidates about what is interesting them about being a candidate for this race, and also what are some of their promises. So this forum, again, is brought to you tonight by Mass Liberation Arizona, but it is also in partnership with Lucha, Living United for Change in Arizona. If you are not familiar with Lucha, Lucha is a membership-led grassroots organization that builds power with Arizona's working families to advance social, racial, and economic justice for all. Through grassroots campaigns, leadership development, advocacy, and civic engagement, Lucha works to create an Arizona in which every person enjoys equal rights, opportunities, and protections. To also tell you a little bit about Mass Liberation Arizona, we are guided by 10 very important values. Those values actually are abolitionist values. For those of you who are not familiar with abolition, I'm going to share with you just briefly what these are, and then you can decide for yourself if maybe you can also be an abolitionist. And if anyone is not already on mute, if you could just mute yourself just for the remainder of the call, that'd be helpful. So our values. Mass liberation values love and rigor. That means that it takes all of us to change the system. We won't always agree on everything, but out of love for our community and each other, we work through challenges instead of walking away. We also, number 2, is to center Black liberation. Despite the fact indigenous, brown, and poor people get caught up in the system, it was designed to target and oppress Black people. So we believe that by liberating Black people, we all get free. Our third value is understanding that the system isn't broken and it was designed to do exactly what it's doing. The system is designed to exploit Black, brown, poor, and indigenous people. We don't believe that the system as we know it can be reformed or fixed. Our next value is all of us or none of us. Liberation for one person at the expense of another is not liberation at all. We seek liberation for all people, regardless of our differences. We do not discriminate. Next value is justice reinvestment. So the money that we currently use to cage people should go into strengthening our communities. So we wish to reinvest it. Our next value is that knowing there is no difference between crime and harm. That distinction is super important to us. Crime is defined by people with power, often battery power. It has no connection to what actually harms us. Battery, 10%. Next value is putting people in cages is never the answer. Sounds like somebody might need to go on mute. That is full stop. Our next value is putting people before property. We prioritize humanity over profit and property. Next is focusing on healing and personal transformation. We seek to dismantle the current system of punishment and retribution and focus on personal growth and healing. And last but certainly not least, we center the experience of directly impacted people. The people closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but oftentimes furthest from the resources. So if those values sound good to you and they make sense to you, there is a very good chance that you might be an abolitionist. Also, when we talk about abolition, there's a lot of rhetoric nowadays, and I think a lot of folks trying it on for size. There is no specific school of thought around abolition. It is something that people are really, I think, exploring and redefining every day. But when we say abolition here with Mass Liberation Arizona, when we say abolish prisons, when we say abolish ICE, when we say abolish police, we mean abolish them. We believe that those systems have no place in a healthy community. So we do not believe that reforming them makes sense. We do not believe that there are bad apples. We believe that the entire system and everything coming from it is fruit from a poisonous tree. It must be completely dismantled, and we should build new systems for our communities that are based on health, wellness, and autonomy. So that being said, I am going to pass it over to our moderator. I do want to just chat really quickly about a couple of technical things tonight. So just to get you familiar with Zoom, if you haven't become familiar already, we do encourage you to use your video. Again, we've been socially distancing. It'd be really nice to see faces and smiles. I know I've been in my house. I can't even tell you the number of days now. So it's been really nice to see everyone's face. And so we do encourage you to use your video function. If you hover down below on your toolbar, you should be able to see a camera. And if your camera has a line through it, that means we can't see your beautiful face. So we ask you, if you would, to click that button if you're comfortable showing your face. Also, if you would change your name, if you have a phone number at the bottom or it doesn't have your name listed, please change your name and add your pronoun preferences. So that would be done by hovering over the participant icon at the bottom of your screen as well. Once you see your name, you'll just hover over your name, and then you can right click and rename yourself, adding your name and your pronouns. Also, this is an interactive meeting, so if you could definitely hit your chat button whenever you feel like you want to comment. We're going to do our best to follow along. There is a Q&A section here tonight as well, so you'll be able to post your questions if you have any. Obviously, we won't be able to take everyone's questions, but we will be able to keep track of those and hopefully be able to develop a system with the candidates to follow up with you as well. I think that that's really it for the Zoom features. We did go live on Facebook, and just for anybody who's on Facebook, please know that there's a 20-second delay, so bear with us as we navigate that, but we'll be checking that chat as well. And then last but not least, I'm gonna drop into our chat now a form that you can follow along with to track the candidates' responses and also help us to see how you're interpreting the things that you're hearing tonight and get your feedback. So if you want to click the link that's inside the chat, and we'll go ahead and drop it in Facebook here momentarily, to click into there and follow along by filling out the Google form. That would be really helpful for us, and I think it would also be helpful for you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator tonight, Halisi Tambuzi. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this evening.
All right, so before we kind of get into this, we're also going to go ahead and do a short video really quickly.
We should not be 56 years out of black people being free and black people still being lynched. Only this time without a rope and a tree, it's a cop and his knee. Frederick Douglass said, rights is of no sex, truth is of no color. And what that meant is he was 100 years ahead of the curve. Frederick Douglass, the most photographed person of the 19th century, the Barack Obama of his time in terms of popularity, said 100 years prior that women and men should get the right to vote at one time. Now, because that didn't happen, you have black men who got the right to vote, who voted on behalf of our community. You got black women armed outside of churches in South Carolina and Georgia to protect that right to vote. And you got a split of the abolitionist movement and the women's suffrage movement. What do you get after that? The Daughters of Confederacy pop up. All types of weird school books pop up that rewrite history. And you have a further divided South now where poor people, period, white or black on the bottom, and you still have a master class.
What do we want? What do we want it? No justice!
We could avoid the 100 years of turmoil by doing the right thing now. If you just get it right now, the next 100 years, we could solve 100 other problems. That crowd is a hodgepodge of people of all different types, and they're all fed up. To the people that are protesting, absolutely, got no bad words for you. The people that burn some shit up, got no bad words for you. All I got is some advice. Organize the day after. Organize what you're going to do next. Malcolm said by any means necessary. I believe by any and every means necessary. I believe that you should make sure you shop local. I believe you should support the little guys. I believe that you should vote. Local voting does count, it does matter. But what matters more is that you organize that vote and you have some demands that come with that organization.
We will be addressing excessive force and the use of excessive force.
United States of America, the land of the free, is the incarceration capital of the world.
So if you want your school board to move your schools in a particular direction, you should start organizing now. If you want your prosecutor to prosecute bad cops, you should let them know that we'll run someone else against you if you don't. We have this every 10, 15, or 20 years. We have revolutionary moments that progress us expeditiously, to borrow a word from our friend T.I., in a blink of an eye, and then it seems we get comfortable and we settle. And Fannie Lou Hamer said that until we all are free, no one is free. So I don't know what this moment means in the bigger schemes, but I know what it means for this generation. For this generation, it is going to grow a crop of organizers and people that fight to maintain what little rights we have a lot of times, and to grow and regrow some things we've been denied. I do know that, and I'm hopeful for that, because that determines the next 20 years and what it will be. We could have freedom in an instant if we organize well enough. We absolutely could, which is why I keep reiterating: plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize.
Thank you for that. Matt, I'm gonna kick it over to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Alisi. First of all, I'd like to have a moment of silence for Carlos Adrian Ingram Lopez. May he rest in power. Say his name. All right, thank you for that. Mass Liberation Arizona, I'd like to welcome everybody to our space this evening. My name is Matthew Kearney, and we are here to hear from three candidates running for Pima County Attorney: Laura Conover, Jonathan Moser, and Mark DeBalt. We will also learn about what is Mass Liberation Arizona and how much Pima County Attorney, the power they hold. America's a tipping point right now in this country that continues to lead the world in locking up its own people. Mass incarceration has emerged in recent years as a defining civil rights issue of movement, has blossomed in which formerly incarcerated people had alongside diverse and influential allies. Powerfully capturing what's at stake has run away the use of incarceration in this country. Go on, Alisi.
All right, thank you, Matt. Next, we're going to go ahead and we just want to give the community some information, some stats on Pima County, just so that they're aware. We want to kind of just make sure we add that piece so that we know what's going on, and we're educated about the position. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Mel, Deb, and Charlene. Mel.
Hello.
Hello, I think we were supposed to have some slides, Halisi. Is Tanya working on that?
I think they're supposed to get sent over. All right.
Yeah, move on to yours, Elise. We'll come
We'll go
back.
ahead, yeah. All right. So I just want to go ahead and talk about this the county attorney position. So county attorney position, one of the most important positions that you're going to find within the county. And so I want to provide you a little bit of context. The county attorney, it's the lead prosecutor. It's a team of prosecutors, and the individual that's being elected is the lead prosecutor. And so prosecutors have the responsibility of charging individuals when a particular crime is committed. They have a long range of authority when it comes to who they're going to charge, or who they're going to charge, what they're going to charge, or if they're going to make a charge at all. And so a lot of times with the elections, when elections come around, what tends to take place is that people obviously know the presidential election, but sometimes you don't necessarily know what powers that they have. And so right now with the county attorneys, you really want to identify the powers that they do yield, because this position is going to be one of the positions that set the structure of what Pima County is going to look like, what the inside of the jails are going to look like. And so for you voters out there, you want to make sure that you are selecting the person, the individual who is shaping, who is willing to shape the criminal justice system in a way that goes with your value system. Okay. And then we have another quick video. All right, so we're going to present another quick video to provide some information just on the county attorney position.
Sorry, y'all, some technical difficulties with Zoom.
And if we have technical difficulties, then we still have the questions, so we're just going to ultimately go into them. I'll just go ahead and give a quick 10 seconds so while the video is being uploaded. All right. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the questions. And so I want to go ahead and give each candidate an opportunity to introduce themselves. So we're going to go ahead and we'll start with Laura.
You're muted, Laura. There you
Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
Yep.
go. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. My name is Laura Conover. I am a lifelong Tucsonan. I am a lifetime reformer, and I am running for Pima County Attorney. Many of you know me and know me that I am usually high energy, and I try to inject humor in the tough road that lies ahead of all of us, but I am in a very somber mood tonight because everyone in Tucson stopped midday today to view the video of a man losing his life in custody, Carlos Adrian. It will never be unwatched again for his family, nor for any of us. I cannot wait any longer for reform. Our community cannot wait any longer for reform. We are 44 years into one criminal justice system, and it is time now to bring in the true reform candidate. I am very happy to be here with you tonight to ensure that we find out together who that true reform candidate is. I started my campaign in November in a coffee shop with 25 of you because Mass Lib and Lucha was what was important to me. I'm so happy to be here again with you tonight, and I look forward to listening to you and how you have experienced today as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next will be Diebold.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Diebold. I am a Tucsonan, raised in Tucson with 3 sisters and a brother by a single mom. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I've never wavered from being a Democrat. I have been a prosecuting attorney for many years. The gist of my focus in most of those years, the vast majority of those years, has been prosecuting violent crimes in Tucson. Violent crimes consist of homicide, attempted murder, drive-by shootings, gang-related, a variety of cases, including vehicular manslaughters. Most of the cases involve weapons. Most of the time, those weapons are either handguns or long guns. I've accumulated many trials, and as a result of that, I think I have learned skills that are important in trying to recognize the most violent criminals in our society and try to focus on those individuals. And while I understand your group is against prison, many of those people that I have prosecuted are in prison, and they're there to be separated from the people that they hurt and from hurting other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
And Moser next. And you're muted, Jonathan.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Good evening, everybody. My name's Jonathan Moser. I am a change agent. I am the reform candidate in this election. We must have a criminal justice system that we all can be proud of. And when I say I'm an agent of change and a reformer, I've actually been reforming from within inside the county attorney's office. Let me give you a couple of examples. I created a system, a written protocol for disclosure of police officer misconduct. Before I took over in the role of chief criminal deputy, we had none. Now we have a system you can actually look at, analyze, and we can work to improve. I also have advocated for a written protocol related to investigations of officer use of deadly force. Like the incidents that we've seen too commonly, we need to make sure that we are all on the same page about how those incidents should be treated. In fact, I'm advocating for an independent agency to be created statewide for investigation or prosecution of those incidents. That would be a massive change. But I've been advocating for change within the office since 2017 for adoption of protocol. I don't get to set the policy in the office right now, but if I do, we will change things dramatically. One other example of reform I've argued for in the office, 10 months ago, I argued that we had to stop charging personal possession of narcotic and dangerous drugs in such large quantities. We charge thousands of those cases a year, and I argued against it. And I was told I don't set the policy for the office. So I don't yet, but if I do,
30 seconds.
If I do, we will change things dramatically. And I look forward to talking about that tonight. I would ask everyone not to judge by labels, not to judge me because I am a prosecutor. I have fought against violent crimes, child crimes, domestic violence. I've trained other prosecutors, but I have also managed and led and implemented changes, and they're just the beginning. I have a reform platform. It's laid out at Mosier2020.com, and it's the most specific reform platform of any candidate in this race.
Time.
Thank you.
So.
All right. So, go ahead, Neil.
So are we on to our question number 2, Halisi? I need to get together with you. Or are we going to number 1?
We're on number 1.
Okay. So this will be 2 minutes each. We're going to start again. We won't start a rotation just yet because it'll mess me up. Conover, then Diebold, then Moser for this question. 2 minutes each. I'll give a 30-second warning.
So this question is, want to hear about each candidate's vision for this position, what you're going to focus on if elected, and what you're going to immediately change if you become elected.
Thank you. My 2 opponents here with us tonight, to be clear, have devoted their careers to this office. Between them combined, there's 40 years experience in the Pima County Attorney's Office. I devoted my career to criminal justice and criminal justice reform. For 12 years, I was a public defender, walking in and out of our jail every single day, trying to be a liberator. That was my dedication to the Constitution, to due process, and to liberty, and fighting the system day in and day out. I am the true reform candidate because I've dedicated my entire life to it. It's not a new platform for a candidate. It is my life. And when we want to know what someone's going to do in office, we look at what they've been doing their entire life. This office remains dedicated to cash bail, which traps people in jail on tiny $250, $500 bonds. It ends on day 1 when I start training the prosecutors in my office how to argue for release myself inside the jail at night, night after night after night, until they learn how to argue and set conditions of release so that people are not held needlessly in custody. I am going to bring back probation to plea agreements to give judges discretion so that they can insist on probationary terms instead of prison. I'm going to deflect simple drug possession and paraphernalia straight into treatment instead of jail. Instead of my opponent, Mr. Mosier, who as criminal chief filed the record-breaking 7,000 felonies in Pima County, yes, this past year, a third of which was simple drug possession and paraphernalia. My opponents had an opportunity for reform for the last 40 years combined. We cannot wait any longer. We finally need to bring an attorney in from outside the agency if we want meaningful change. Thank you.
Thank you. And Diebold next. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mark Diebold. I do agree with Alicia, who said earlier, probably the biggest power that the lead prosecutor has is deciding what charges. I think that's the most important thing. One of the first things I would do is I would empower individual prosecutors to use their discretion on cases. We don't have that now. We have a strict guideline that needs to be followed. The strict guideline that needs to be followed for the bails and people who've been incarcerated, a strict guideline how to handle cases and what pleas to offer. I want to empower these individuals, make decisions based on a case-by-case analysis. I also want to reach out and bring in all kinds of people from our community. We don't have that array of people that we need within the office to reach out to the minority groups and to understand what different groups of people are going through. I would expand that recruitment. I would expand the training in the office. I would expand the retention of the people. I would increase the morale by giving individuals empowerment so they can make decisions that they're entitled to make on a case-by-case analysis. Working with the defense team, working with the defense bar on making those decisions. And yes, I would reduce and not charge anything under a gram of narcotic or dangerous drug if it's a personal use amount. If it's not
30 seconds.
To the crime. I would eliminate personal use marijuana charging. These decisions we made, I would leave people out of jail unless they were a danger to themselves or to flight or to hurt somebody else. As I mentioned earlier, I would not pursue death penalty. It's a waste of time, resources, and money. And that's it.
And Moser, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So the first fundamental understanding of the county attorney is that they are the leader of the office, both civil and criminal divisions, and that means they set the policy. And that means that if you're not the county attorney, you don't get to set the policy. And that's the office within which I've worked. So I won't take responsibility for policies that I've argued against for years. What I will do is change them. Look at Mosier2020.com and look at my reform plan. It is the most detailed reform plan of any candidate, and I've committed to these things in writing since October. So for example, personal possession of marijuana cases, I was the first candidate to come out and say, I simply won't prosecute adults for possessing marijuana, period. We can do that even if there isn't a law change. And the way we can do that is because there's a statute that says we don't have to waste scarce criminal justice resources prosecuting anything. Not only that, I'm the only candidate that's been talking about clearing those personal possession of marijuana convictions off of people's records. How would I do that without legislation? I know the answer is because I've been working within the system. We'll have an omnibus motion and we will get that done. We will let people get jobs. One of the things that I'm most interested in is I'm an addict and an alcoholic with 19 years of sobriety. And that moment of grace where I became willing to sober up, that saved my life, but I want that for others. It has made the difference for me and it will make the difference for others. We must encourage treatment instead of prison. We will never send a drug addict to prison merely for possessing drugs on my watch, period. Whether it's meth, heroin, or any other drug, they will get treatment, not prison. I will end the death penalty. I will expand community justice boards and restorative justice programming. I will reform, I will push for law enforcement reforms and reform whatever I can from within the office. Look at my plan at Mosier2020.com and notice that it is by far the most detailed reform plan of any candidate. Thank you.
And the next question will be 3 minutes, starting with Debo.
So this next question is going to focus on mass incarceration. So the status of Arizona and where Arizona's place is with the rest of the country and with the rest of the world. So the United States, the leader when it comes to mass incarceration, Arizona, number 6. So that essentially Arizona being number 6, Arizona's the number 6 in the world. Now we're not talking within just the country. We're talking within the whole globe when it comes to filling up its prisons. So do you have a goal to reduce mass incarceration? So what's your goal and how do you achieve that goal?
Well, first, the first thing you do is you can prevent crimes from happening with the young people. You can do it by mentoring and reaching out to the young folks. You can do it by education. And I think money has to be diverted to mentoring of young people and education of young people. To first, not even get them in the system that gets them into jail and prison. Beyond that, there are many things that can be done that we are working on diversion. So many crimes that people are charged with can be diverted, so they don't have to end up in jail or prison. I would change things about the diversion program and add things to the diversion program. For example, now in the part of the diversion program, if you don't make your appointment and get there by such and such a date, you failed through the diversion program. We have to be more lenient than that with these young people to get them in diversion. I want to open diversion up to more and more things, so more and more types of crimes can be diverted, so we don't have this spiraling downhill incarceration rate of repeat offenders where they have to go back to jail and prison over and over again. I want not them The diversion lets you not have a record in some of the diversion programs we have. I want to expand that. I want to not put drug addicts in prison. I don't want to put drug addicts in jail. I want to prosecute only a priority of cases and charge a priority of cases, and that we would list at the most serious down to the least serious. And I do agree, possession of marijuana, I wouldn't charge for personal use under a gram. And we do charge hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of felony drug cases per year, where it takes an officer, then a detective, then the jail system, then the prosecutor, then the prosecutor's staff, then the judge, all that. It's a ton of time, a ton of money, a ton of resources. We do that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a year. I would not prosecute those small amount pocket drugs, what we call pocket drugs. And I think the pocket drugs cases do have some racial implications sometimes. I mean, there's inherent, maybe not practice, but inherent racism in that entire system of charging the small pocket drugs. I would eliminate that, eliminate the marijuana charges, eliminate the pocket drug charges. I would allow early release programs. I mean, I would promote early release programs from
30
people
seconds.
who are incarcerated. I would support not a community supervision, but which is fine, but a community service. If you agree to do community service, you could reduce off your jail sentence and reduce off your, in a minimum setting, off your prison sentence. Many people don't need to be in prison.
Got a quick follow-up question.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned there about the charging for less than a gram, not less than a gram. So I just want to be clear. So if anything over a gram, then you will seek federal prosecution, or
well, felony. Yeah. So I mean, right now you can go down to 1/10 of a gram. I mean, and I've seen cases charge 0.15, of a gram. But there's got to be a cutoff to start and see where we get with that. And if we have to raise that at some point, I'm okay with that too. But I'm talking about a guy who's on a bike, who's got a crack pipe in his shirt pocket. The cop sees him, stops him, sees the crack pipe, searches him, finds it in his pocket, 3/4 of a gram of methamphetamine. I mean, what do you do with that guy? Okay? Do you arrest him for a felony, charge him with a felony, stick a felony on him
30
for
seconds.
the rest of his life, and then take him down to jail, book him into jail, decide if the judge is going to let him out, have the prosecutor, follow these guidelines and ask for a bail, and then go through the whole process? I say, no, he's an addict. Okay? Don't charge him with a felony offense. Anything, you got to start somewhere. Okay? And I start with a gram. Okay? If it's a little over a gram, same. That's why I give discretion to these young prosecutors. Make a decision. Okay? Make the right decision for this person. All right? And do the right thing. Don't charge him.
Time. And next, Mosier, 3 minutes, please.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Mosier, and I believe we need to put on an entirely new pair of glasses in the way that we look at what we're doing in the criminal justice system, especially with prison. So when I was chief criminal deputy, I invited a guy named Michael Morton to come talk to our office. He was somebody who was wrongly convicted of murdering his own wife, who was brutally raped and murdered. And I invited him to come talk to our office because I wanted to make sure our prosecutors, and I've invited defense lawyers to attend as well, because I wanted everyone to know that a prosecutor's highest calling is to never inflict that kind of torment on a person, not to wrongly convict the innocent. When Michael Morton came to speak to us, he was asked, what do you think about prosecutors? Because keep in mind, a prosecutor who was unethical cost him 20+ years of his life in prison. And his answer was interesting because he said, when I was in prison, I was in there with some good people, but I was also in with some people who are absolutely violent and dangerous. And you need good police and good prosecutors to make sure that your children and your families are protected from people who are truly violent and dangerous. Here's the problem, folks. We've had that view as though every case that comes through our office, somehow prison is the goal. That is absolutely wrong. How do I know that? For 15 years, I've been a prosecutor. For 10 of those years, I was prosecuting major cases like rape, serial sex assault, child molestation, fatal child abuse, cold case murders, domestic violence murders. And when I was promoted into management roles, I noticed that prosecutors are using some of the same approaches we use in those types of cases, in cases that are far less serious and don't merit a prison-oriented approach. What do I mean by that? Watch the Netflix documentary 13th, and it'll go by really quickly, but there's this one part where they say, look, people prosecute based on the name of a charge, and that's a problem. And that is a problem. I will fix that immediately. A burglary comes in all kinds of flavors. And look, if somebody is breaking into your home through the window at night, we may have to disagree about whether that person eventually has to go to prison if other programs fail. However, if a woman and a man break up and he goes back without her permission to get his TV, and that's labeled on the indictment burglary, that does not merit the same type of approach. And I'm telling you, that type of problem comes in a great many flavors.
30 seconds.
I'll start with addiction. We will create a pre-charge diversion program so that instead of a couple hundred addicts getting diversion type of programming in Pima County Superior Court, we will have 1,000 to 2,000 people getting treated and hopefully getting sober. And that'll save lives. It'll also save a massive amount of money. Look, you're not the reform candidate because you say you are because of what you will do. And I've been working within the system trying to build that.
Thank you.
So really kind of want to just point out and please clarify for me that the plan in order to reduce the incarceration rate. And I feel like that point may have been missed. The plan in place to drop the incarceration rate.
Right. So number one, we've got to get this 1,000 to 2,000 people into treatment services, which are an alternative to going down the line towards prison. So first and foremost, stop prosecuting drug addiction in any way that results in a prison sentence. If the charge is possession of narcotic drug or possession of dangerous drug, that won't result in prison on my watch, no matter how many times you reoffend and have heroin in the park. So yes, that will reduce the number of people go into prison.
30 seconds.
Additionally, we've got to take a look at what types of charges we are actually seeking prison on. So the burglary example I used is a good one. On property crimes, we need to reassess whether there's better options available than prison. And so we can reduce the number of people incarcerated in the jail and in prison significantly by taking approaches that are not aimed always at prison as the successful.
All right, thank you,
Thank
Jonathan.
you. And Conover is next. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Neil. The nation leads the world on mass incarceration, and Arizona leads the nation because we are still stuck on the war on drugs that formed this office in the 70s and 80s, and we have not broken out of it. Our Republican sheriff last year told us the crime rate was down, but they broke the record nevertheless. Under my opponent, Mr. Moser, as criminal chief, they broke the record in all-time Superior Court filings. We have to stop that. We have to deflect addiction and mental illness into treatment and not even book them in the jail. The jail is an unhealthy, unsafe, and traumatizing place that is only for people who must be separated from our community. We then have to look at our charging and our plea agreements. We have to get rid of this insistence on prison-only plea agreements that takes away all discretion from judges. We just put probation on there and we duke it out in court. Then we look at conviction integrity. Do we need to have experts looking at wrongful convictions? Absolutely. But I want to take it a step way further than that. I want to know what happened with all those thousands of people during the decades of the war on drugs who suffered disparate sentences. I want to hear from the family whose son is doing 20 years on crack distribution when the guy in the neighborhood next door only did 5 years on a cocaine distribution. I want a conviction integrity unit that's looking at people who are serving way too much time in our Arizona state prisons. This is the kind of reform that we're actually talking about tonight. And it's not enough to throw it on your website or to learn brand new vocabulary. You have to have studied it your entire life. And that's exactly what I did. I need to hire experts to come in and help me dig into the last 40 years and make right some of the wrongs that we have engaged in. 4 years ago, the sitting county attorney decided to run one last time. And my opponent, Mr. Moser, was the biggest proponent for her and said, give her another 4 years and ignore the reform candidate. And he said, we'll do reform. And then
30
they spent
seconds.
millions of dollars on grant money to set up a drug court and only put 60 people in it a year, 60 people a year. I've been railing against that for years, and I never could find Mr. Moser standing there with me calling for reform. It was wrong then, and it's wrong now, and we've got a chance to make it right. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any follow-up, Halisi?
I didn't need additional clarity on that one.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, there'll be like 3 questions, but we'll ask all 3 to one candidate, and then we'll ask all 3 to the next candidate. Each question will have 1 minute. And the first candidate to answer will be Moser.
Okay. So with this one, we've seen the videos of George Floyd. We've seen the subsequent protesting throughout the world, and now within Pima County we have Carlos Adrian Ingram Lopez, who recently passed away, who's recently killed. How has murders such as these and the public response affected your thinking about the county attorney's role towards law enforcement when they engage in criminal behavior?
In some ways, I want to challenge the change insofar as I've been arguing that we have to obtain public trust by increased transparency, especially in how we handle officer-involved deadly use of force. So for example, in 2017, I started arguing that our office needed a written protocol that we could make publicly available so that people could see how we handle these events. And the thing that happened when we did the other protocol I talked about earlier on a police disclosure of police officer misconduct is that part of the protocol process is a collaborative process. I want you to read it, and I want you to tell me what's wrong with it so we can make it better. I support a statewide separate investigation and prosecution agency because I don't think we'll have public trust in a single elected official. Frankly, if it's Laura Conover or me or Barbara Lawal, we need to have an agency charged with handling these cases.
Time.
And so you mentioned the agency with handling those cases, and so that actually leads right to my next question, and is how do you prosecute officers when there's a relationship between attorneys and law enforcement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're never going to get past that problem when we reside these issues with local authorities. And so let's get creative and make a system that we can all get behind. Let's all get at the same table and create that system. Now, look, along the way, what can I do if we can't get that done in the Arizona legislature? Because we've all had broken hearts over inability to produce results in the legislature. So within Pima County, we can still create a collaborative approach, encouraging an independent agency like that right here in Pima County. It'll be a model for the state and the first of its kind, and I'm somebody who can get that done. I have been working with the people who need to help get that built.
And so you've touched on I've heard within your response, you supported an independent unit that focuses. Now, that independent unit, would it focus solely on prosecutions of law enforcement or correctional officers?
I think what we need to do is have that unit handle investigation and prosecution, as well as training and public-facing data. So it should be the one place we can all go to find out how many of these incidents they are, where they happen, who's involved, what ethnicities, you know, what was the cause and manner of death. I mean, everybody can go to one place to find that information out, and then that agency could also be responsible for maintaining the statewide protocol and training others in approaches that will help reduce fatalities. I've argued in favor of de-escalation training ever since I attended it myself last year. As chief criminal deputy, I went to a de-escalation training. I saw it was the future. I've been preaching that ever since I saw it, for the reason that it will avoid some of these fatalities. It will. And to do that training, though, costs.
Thank you. And Conover will be next. 1 minute for each of the 3 questions.
So I'll go back through the questions just in case you need to. Are you good? Okay.
No, thank you. Please repeat if you would. Thank you so much.
So how have the recent murders, the recent deaths, as well as the public response affected your thinking about the county attorney's role when it comes to prosecuting law enforcement?
Thank you. This is not a new problem. It's unfortunate that we're talking about solutions now. We should have brought in solutions years ago that might have helped with the incident we watched today. It's not a new problem. What's new is the camera footage of what we see. And what I'm haunted by with George Floyd is him calling for his mother, who had passed 2 years earlier.
30 seconds.
And today we had the same thing. He was calling for his nana and for agua, y te lo pido, which in urgency is I beg you. This is not a new problem. Unfortunately, we've got to attack it now. And the relationship between law enforcement and the prosecutorial office is inherently a conflict. And that's not a new revelation either. This is a problem that's haunted this office.
You're touching on the second question, so I'm going to go ahead and let you continue because it goes right into that second. So you go ahead and finish your 1 minute, but I just want to go ahead and kind of just clarify this second point, just so that we're clear. It's how do you prosecute officers when there is a relationship between the county attorney and the law enforcement organizations,
So I grew up in Tucson. Mr. Diebold grew up in Tucson. Mr. Moser didn't, so he may not realize that waiting for the state legislature is going to keep us waiting a long time. And Lola, forgive me, but I don't want Maricopa County dictating for us what happens to an incident down here in Tucson. We have to have a local solution to the problem. I would love a statewide agency if it someday appears, but I need a local independent prosecutor right now, like Bob Mueller did in the Trump investigation. This person would not answer to me.
30 seconds.
They would do an independent investigation, and they would be responsible elsewhere. They would not report to me, so that we could get a fair, transparent assessment of these critical investigations. That's something that the office can do right now, if needed, for this current incident. I offer it up.
And the last question is, do you support an independent unit that focuses solely on the prosecutions related to law enforcement and even correction officers?
Yes, and I think the sheriff's candidates have talked about that too, that we need to be looking at what happens inside the jail as well, that it's very critical. I mean, those people are extremely vulnerable in there. So we need to be looking at corrections officers and the police departments. And what we need is that independent expert with that independent phone number that you can call to report harassment. to report a bad stop, to report behavior in front of your child, to report whatever it is that you confront on the street. You need to be able to locally report that. And these will be experts who can investigate and make prosecutorial recommendations. It's the independence and neutrality that's just so key.
Thank you. All right, and Mark, you're up. Do you need me to go ahead and get the responses? I'll go ahead and give the responses just so we're clear, or the question. Excuse me.
Okay.
So how has the police murders, how has the murder of George Floyd and the public response affected your thinking about the county attorney's role towards law enforcement when they engage in this criminal behavior?
Well, I see. So in 1992, I was in Los Angeles when the Rodney King riots broke out. And it was the most surreal experience I've ever been through in my life. 28 years ago, that happened. Next year, I went to law school with the idea to make a difference when I got out of law school. I see these recent horrible events this has to be the year.
30
we
seconds.
have gone through this political divide. We've gone through this pandemic. We've gone through this racial injustice. We've gone through the police brutality. This has to be a year that we reach out for fair treatment and justice for everybody. We need a commitment to do that. And I would make that commitment. That I know we're blending into the other questions that you were going to ask about the relationships and things of that nature.
Time.
We're going to go right into the relationships, and so you can go ahead and continue. So how do you prosecute them when there is that relationship?
There is a relationship. You're absolutely right. There is. So just today I read about at least 3 different jurisdictions, and I don't remember specifically where they are. I didn't write them down, throughout the country, that they are looking at the Attorney General's office as a possible go-to agency for the independent investigation of the officer-involved fatalities. Okay, I don't know the specifics of that, of how they're going to do it and how they're going to transfer that. It might be a legislative thing that they have to do because we do it now. But I like the idea, as well as that idea, I like the idea of having a 2 or 3 person unit, and all they do is officer-involved shootings, officer-involved fatalities, and they have quick responses, quick facts, and they're transparent. They divulge all the information they have. I mean, this world is changing. We know that. And what's making it a little bit more fair for everyone is the video cameras, the body-worn cameras that we're seeing. Without the footage in all these situations, we wouldn't have the information that we have, and we wouldn't have these prosecutions that we have.
Time.
And would you include corrections officers within that framework? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yes, so long as you wear a uniform, you have some authority, you have control over individuals, or certainly in a corrections institution, you have control or authority of an individual, and certainly on the streets, you have some authority or control over human beings. You're wearing a uniform. They should be held to the same standard, okay? And I would have a same unit, 3 people in this unit. And they're kind of screened off from having regular contact with law enforcement, like I would have over the years, okay, on cases. And all they would do is evaluate these cases.
30 seconds.
And I think the screening of these people, independent of having daily contact with different law enforcement agencies, they can be a little bit more open-minded about this. They can review all the body-worn cameras. They can review the corrections video surveillance and make the right decisions. And I have no problem prosecuting, charging, and convicting an officer who's done something wrong and certainly has killed somebody and murdered somebody.
Okay, thank you. The next question will be 2 minutes each to answer, starting with Conover.
All right, so this question is going to be, this question is a little bit, going to be a little bit outside of the scope of what you may not necessarily be able to do. But do you support an independent community oversight committee of law enforcement? And if so, what are the factors? What are some key factors that would go into this kind of community board that would make it so it is efficient and effective?
So one of the fundamental places I've been thinking about this is I've been looking at a lot of disparities between the Tucson Police Department and the sheriffs. So there are levels of citizen oversight and collaboration at the city that the sheriffs don't have yet. And I do want to bring that up because we have a long ways to go in places where we have to create something from the ground up. At the city, we have CPARP, and we have an independent police auditor. I think what we're finding out even today is that we're going to need to put more strength into community oversight. We need reporting requirements to make sure they're getting all of the information that they need. We need to rehaul what's there and give it teeth, for lack of a better phrase. It clearly doesn't have enough space at the table right now. And what we saw today, I think we learned overall that we need firm rules about immediate transparency and public disclosure about any loss of life in particular, when in police custody.
30 seconds.
That will be the rule under my administration. You will have to inform me in my office immediately if someone passes in police custody. So it'll be the rule, not the exception. So yes, where we have nothing, we must work with the community to create. And where we have some limited advisory councils, we clearly need to add weight behind them.
I have one quick follow-up question to that, and just for kind of just additional clarity. You know, yeah. Oftentimes when you start talking about the law, start using terms like reasonable and immediate, and then you have to talk about, well, the other facts that would play into whether or not it was reasonable. So you're saying immediate. Can you give a sense of what immediate might look like? I don't mean to put you too much on the spot, but. Yeah,
no. I think if we're talking about immediate notification, I mean, obviously the incident here locally happened in April and was catching people off guard a week ago. So that's just something horrible, you know, in the reporting command there fell apart. I mean, it just completely fell apart, and we've got to look at that. Immediate to me is probably going to mean 12 to 24 hours. So I really do mean immediate. I want my office notified.
30 seconds.
Especially if there is a loss of life in police custody. I need my office informed. We need transparency in general. I've said from day one, I've got to hire a criminologist to track and then share data. All of this has to be transparent with the public if we're going to get anywhere on reform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and Diebold is next.
All right.
2 minutes for the question.
Do you support an independent community oversight committee for law enforcement, and what factors might go into it to make it successful?
Well, I do support that. I think a community advisory board would be a great tool for a prosecuting attorney. We would need to reach out to all segments of the community. During this process of this election process, I've had the chance to meet several people that I did not know in the past, and I'm very impressed with all the ones that I've met. But I think with community leaders from different communities in Pima County, we can pull them together on a monthly basis. And the biggest thing is to listen and then learn from what these people are saying to. I don't think we do that now. And they can ask questions why things are done a certain way. We can ask questions what public safety means to them, how we can help them, how we can make their community, what's going to make a difference. And yes, I think of the people I've met thus far, these people would be interested from a variety of different groups to get together on a monthly or quarterly basis and have discussions, intelligence discussions. And I would have not just myself, but other prosecutors there to listen and learn from them. They can address specific safety issues in their own community. They can bring up whatever they want. But I think if the advisory board then comes up with good advice, good ideas for the chief prosecutor, and that chief prosecutor can put it into play, and I think the community learns from that and the community wins with that.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Was there any follow-up question to that,
No.
Halisi? Okay.
No.
And then Moser, the same question, 2 minutes.
All right, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are. We hear you.
Thank you. So we talked about ultimately the solution would be a statewide agency, and we all agree that legislatively it'll be difficult to produce. So we've got to take an interim approach. That's what I talked about earlier. The statewide agency should not be the Attorney General's office, in my opinion. So my proposed approach in the interim, while we're waiting for legislation ultimately that will produce a statewide agency, which would be the best approach, is a county agency where you give up, as the county attorney, you literally give up some of your vested authority and reassign it. This can be done. It could be done immediately, but the thing that needs to not be done and should not be done immediately is you've got to build it first. And so I think there needs to be an advisory committee or task force that is assembled from, it's got to include police officers, it's got to include defense lawyers. The people who defend officers accused of murder are not prosecutors. They're criminal defense lawyers. And so you need them sitting at the table. And you also need community members and activists. And so you get everybody around the table and you come up with the best approach for Pima County, but it probably looks something like having a prosecutor or prosecutors assigned outside of our building without our oversight from the county attorney's office so that they independently make decisions in these cases. And I would propose gathering the necessary experts around the table, again, including community members, defense lawyers, and figure out the best way to do this so that, again, what's it all about? Restoring public trust or gaining public trust, because we won't have that when it's a single elected official, whether you're charging someone with murder or you're not charging someone with murder.
30 seconds.
Your motives will always be questioned. The additional benefit, and that's why I said earlier, this is a model to be used throughout the country, really, if we can create it, is that it will also be the hub of data sharing and training. So we'll get a protocol, it'll be used countywide. We don't have that right now. That's super important. I think we can save lives when we start doing training out of an agency like this, and we can create it here in Pima County without any legislative oversight.
Time.
Thank you.
Is there any?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
just want to be clear about one aspect. So one aspect, I know that you mentioned a little bit earlier that it was statewide. That was kind of the goal. And then and so now there's a sense that, hey, we can do it in Pima County. We can do something here because that would be most effective. I think just in the short term.
What I said earlier was, and I'm trying to say this in both questions, I think I did say, I prefer a statewide approach because we will always think about it, in Pima County, you'll have Pima County people working with Pima County law enforcement. It's too close. We need to get this to be a statewide assignment so that you don't have people who are working with, prosecutors, law enforcement officers working together regularly. That's part of the problem with public trust. So the best long-term solution is a statewide agency. As I said in both answers, in the interim, we can create a model approach right here in Pima County. We can create a model so that we can use it to lobby statewide once we show that it works. Look, I'm the only candidate who's ever prosecuted a cop. And you know what happens when people lose these cases because they don't know what they're doing? I mean, we can have riots when that happens. You need a prosecutor who knows how to go after a cop. I've prosecuted a cop for sexual abuse. I saw the thin blue line up close. I had to walk through it and argue that case with all the cops sitting on the other.
I have one short question to that, just because you mentioned it. When was that last prosecution?
That was up in Flagstaff. I want to say probably 2013-ish. I don't remember the exact year. The name of the defendant was Rob Evans, and it's in the papers. We could Google it, but I just don't remember the exact year.
Okay.
Before 2015.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Our next question will be 2 minutes each. First to answer is Debo.
All right, so this one's focused on essentially accountability, evidence, and it's really kind of focused on Brady's list. And I just want to give a quick information to the audience of what the Brady list is. Brady list is essentially a document that tracks law enforcement individuals who have misrepresented, lied, perjured themselves. And so when they're called into court, their evidence, their statements could be mostly inadmissible because of their past actions. And so my question to you all, to the candidates, is: can you commit to publishing the names of the officers who are on a Brady's list, including accusations and the findings that are against them?
Thank you. So what we do now is we receive information from the officer's file that indicates that he or she was found to be untruthful, committed some sort of misconduct, or had lied to someone as a part of the job. That's recorded in a police report. We take that information. We don't necessarily publish it to the world, but we do provide it to the defense attorney and the defendant who's charged with the crime. I think that all plays into the credibility, if you will, of the officer. And you're right, later on, if he has to testify at trial, then that could be used to impeach his or her testimony at the time of trial. So we have a full disclosure program where we turn over those reports about the incident involving the officer. We give it to the defense attorney, and the defense attorney then decides how to approach it with that. Oftentimes they'll come to the prosecutor who's handling the case and say, we have this officer, he's got a credibility, a truthfulness problem. Is there a way we can resolve this case short of trial? So that's a benefit, or could be a benefit, to an individual defendant who's charged, if he's correctly and lawfully charged with a crime, because it could help the plea negotiation process. But we are required to turn that information over. We do turn that information over. And in fact, the defense attorney gets opportunity, if we were going to call that person to testify at trial,
30
to
seconds.
interview that person before the trial actually starts.
And so the question, so you turn it over to the defense attorney, but the question's really focused on the community aspect. Is the community going to be notified of these law enforcement officers who may not have been necessarily truthful? And would your office commit to publishing those?
I don't know that we would publish that directly to the general public, because if it does go to trial, that information may be limited to the judge and how the judge decides to let it come into trial. And so I think if you taint the entire community with the person's name, I don't think anyone gets a fair trial, because both the prosecution and defense deserve a fair trial. Because if you have victims on one side and a defendant on the other side, everyone wants a fair trial. It's part of the due process justice program. So I don't think in advance of the trial, because those people could have read about that and already formed opinions. If it goes to trial, and that officer gets on the stand and is impeached or questioned about that, that's wide open, and that does become public, and that is a published information at the time of trial.
Thank you.
Mosier is next.
Okay. So, Moser, could you commit to publishing officers who have been placed on the Brady's list?
So what was the first? Can you do the whole question again?
Yeah.
There was.
Yeah. Can you commit to publishing the officers' names on the website of the names of officers who have been on the Brady's list, and including the accusations and the findings against them?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought there was a prior part of the question before that. No?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So here's what we need with the, I don't like using the term Brady list, and I've tried to get officers away from it, and I'm going to explain why, as well as prosecutors and defense lawyers. So we need a system where every officer, other than their social security number and their private medical information, all of their good and bad conduct is uploaded to the cloud and publicly available. That is the future. That is how we'll get public trust. We've got to be transparent. You want to see every good thing, every bad thing, and you can decide for yourself. If you're a defense lawyer, you can decide how to use it at trial. If you're a member of the public, you can decide whether you have confidence in what we're doing with police discipline, et cetera. But the problem is we don't have that system yet. So what I've tried to do within the office, and this is why I say I am the reform candidate, is because I've been trying to achieve that in whatever way I can, working within the structures of the office. So I advocated successfully for adoption of a written protocol. In fact, I met with Joel Feynman, the public defender, who's attending tonight and has commented to many of you. And I told him I was doing that. And he said that would be actually real progress. And if so, he would withdraw hundreds of motions he was planning on filing, because it would address a real need. And in that meeting, I asked him, please stop using the term liars list. And the reason is because what we want to do is we want to encourage police officers that, look, we need all your conduct, okay? Good, bad, and different. Give it over to the defense. Let them decide how to use it in a trial. So we don't want to make judgments around it. We don't want to make
30 seconds.
We just need to get the information, folks. And so I'm literally trying to change the conversation in a productive way. Adopting the protocol I did would normally cause an uproar with police unions and management and officers. But what we did is we worked collaboratively with the community to make sure everybody knew what we were doing. From Joel to the police officers, they knew I was adopting a protocol. We worked on it. It's publicly available. We can improve it. I would love everyone watching this to take a look at it, see what's wrong with it, and help me make it better. That's how we'll have a justice system we can all be proud of.
Time.
Thank you. All right, Laura, can you commit to publishing the county attorney's office on the website names of officers on the Brady's list, including the accusations and the findings against them?
Is it, Neil, is this 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Last fall feels like 5 years ago, and I was struggling to remember that I'm pretty certain there's a bill in front of the Arizona legislature right now that's right on point with this, because there is this community drive to, and even a legislative drive to have transparency, because transparency builds trust. And these criminal justice reform bills are really critical in the legislature. That's one of them. Last session, there were 12 bills. One made it to the governor's desk. And this Pima County Attorney's Office drove up to Phoenix and asked the governor to veto it. So we certainly need a new Pima County Attorney in office to stand with legislative reform. We need transparency when it comes to this, while we also honor due process, right? I think we can all agree that due process is critical. So officers need a chance to respond and appeal to the accusations that are against them. And once that due process period is over, yes, I think the more transparency we have, the better. Thank you.
Okay.
Next question.
Yep.
It will be Moser answering first, and 2 minutes for answering.
I think this was just the
Is
actually a fairly quick question, and so it's still dealing in transparency. The interesting thing, so I go to the county attorney website and try to just identify who's who, what are the roles that people have, and so there's no organizational chart that's readily available. It's something that you would have to ultimately put in a records request, and those seem like something that minute. A regular someone in the community should just be able to go see what are the positions after the county attorney position. And so the question is, could you commit to being transparent and putting up and at least adding an organizational chart?
I can commit to far more than yes. We'll put that up. We have to have data, not just the org chart. We are public servants. Your taxpayer dollars go to our work. We're supposed to be serving the community. You must know what we're doing, and we should have good data up at the public-facing data about what crimes we're charging, racial, ethnic data, how many people are in jail for what offenses. We need to step into the 21st century lickety-split. We should have been there long ago. I have the IT director endorsement, the administrator's endorsement. We can make these things happen. I mean, I know these people and they're excited about doing exactly what you're talking about. It needs to happen yesterday.
Yeah, and so I did have various examples here as far as transparency, such as far as data tracking, diversion types, charges, race, gender, and all those things. So these are the types of questions that I'm just posing to all of you. So who's up next? Neil?
Conover.
So in addition to the minor org chart, the rest of the data. So can you commit to publishing organizational charts as well as other data readily available onto the county attorney website?
Yes, absolutely. And of course, part of my obsession going all the way back to the 90s with criminal justice right here in this community is that this office doesn't track and share data. Law enforcement, our law enforcement here complains that they don't even get shared data. And that's a huge problem because you can't track outcomes if you don't track and share data. So if you go to lauraconover.com, you'll see that that's how I set up my website. You'll go under news and issues, and there's a section called facts, and you'll see all my data because I had to build the data myself. You'll see where I went through Superior Court records. You'll see where I went through jail records. You'll see where I went through the Department of Corrections records to create my own database about what this office needs to change. It's a $40 million budget. It's 60% of the Pima County General Fund. We spend 60% of the general fund on law and order, and that's the jail and police and everyone. We have to be good stewards to the community and transparent about that. And the only way to measure that is to track and share data transparently. So yes, that's a day one goal for me as well, that we've got to be more transparent about the data. Certainly.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mark, same question to you. So we don't have to go through records requests for teaching people how to do records requests just to get minor information. So can your office commit to producing the data, such organization charts, and then as well as the data when it comes to crime, when it comes to tracking who is going to be behind the prison and jail walls?
Yes, absolutely. Anything I could do to make it easier for the public to access who's doing what, data that we have. We have intel people who can put data together and put it on the website. I think it's important for the public to have that trust in the prosecutor's office. It can be done, it should be done, and I will make a promise to do it.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question we'll have 3 minutes to answer. Let's see. Conover going first.
All right. So now we're going to kind of moving on to charging. So even though there has been a decrease in violent crimes, Pima County Attorney's Office continues to prosecute at record numbers in cases per year. Is that a problem, and how will you change that?
Halisi, can you back up to that question again and say, did you say even though violent crime is down? Is that what you said?
Yeah, even though
Okay.
violent crime is down.
Yes. Yeah. Got it. I've been looking at that in particular this week. Ever since I started this campaign, I've talked a lot about how every DA's office in the nation must and will have a strong violent crime unit. And that my two opponents, the two gentlemen here, devoted their careers to violent crime. And that's a critical part of the office, and my office will have a strong violent crime unit. But violent crime is less than 1% of the total obligations and responsibilities of the leader, the attorney manager that we are hiring through an election. We're not promoting a violent crime prosecutor, we are electing a leader. And I think when you devote your entire career to the most extreme cases that have ever hit your community, you end up with this tunnel vision of who we are. And we're so much more than that. So from the beginning, I've said, you know, homicide is less than 1% of the job for the leader, thank heavens. And interestingly enough, just this week, the New York Times took a look at 5 different agencies across the nation and mentioned Tucson in particular, and said that less than 5% of all 911 calls is violent crime. You know, and so and it's a look at, well, what did the police actually do then? What is their job? What are they doing out in the community if 95% of 911 calls have nothing to do with violent crime? And that's why you need a leader in this office who's not just available and accessible, but present in the community, that understands that the crime rate is down, that's listening that violent crime is down, and instead of the old way, year after year after year, including this year with my opponent's office, instead of trying to show the community that you're tough on crime and that you're working so hard for them by sweeping people into the jail for not only simple drug possession, but drug paraphernalia, you have to reframe prosecutorial priorities so we are actually taking care of the community.
30 seconds.
I grew, thank you, Neil. I grew up here, and one of the things I've been thinking about is the role model that I will be for young prosecutors in my office. For 17 years, weekly, I have been in the Pueblo Gardens neighborhood for weekly Monday night literacy tutoring. I actually saw a couple of attorneys here that I know from that program. And now for the last 4 years, I bring my little boy, and he comes with me 4 years in a row now, because we live in this community.
Time.
And my prosecutors will as well.
And Diebold is next. Thank you, Laura.
Okay, Mark. So even though there has been a decrease in violent crime, the Pima County Attorney's Office continues to prosecute record numbers of cases year after year. Do you see a problem with this? If so, how will you change that?
I do see a problem. So I think violent crime is very, very important to the quality of life of all of us. And that's what I would focus on. People with the guns, killing people and causing harm. As I mentioned, I would not prosecute pocket drugs, anyone with pocket drugs. for a felony offense. I would not put them in jail absent some extraordinary circumstances. I wouldn't prosecute personal amounts of marijuana. That's going to keep gram or less out of jail. It's going to keep marijuana possession out of jail, hopefully out of prison. I wouldn't charge them with a felony so they don't catch a felony for the next time around. I would prioritize the cases. I would prioritize them with the most violent cases at the top. Gun crimes, gang activity, home burglaries where people are in danger, with people entering their homes with guns. My wife says car theft because her car was stolen a few months ago. That wouldn't be in the top priority. I would look at financial crimes for her, maybe. Financial crimes are important because they have victims. Okay, domestic violence is very important because it's a cycle that people get involved in. They can't break the cycle from the victims to the defendants. Gang activity or gang mentality, as I call it, is, I think, prevalent throughout certain parts of our county, where people, or young people primarily, are behaving like gangsters and causing problems. I would do no death penalty, absent extraordinary circumstances. I think and I know your group has very strong opinions on many parts of this, but someone who's charged with first-degree murder can and could be eligible for natural life in prison. Okay, that is a significant penalty if it's proven and the person is given due process and gets a fair trial. The death penalty is a waste of millions and millions of dollars and a waste of space for people to be in a special section of the Department of Corrections just for death penalty cases. Some low-level cases also, I'm not going to go through a laundry list of those, not the drug ones we mentioned, not the marijuanas we mentioned, but other low-level felony cases, class 6 felonies. We have to make a decision. Are those worth chasing after somebody, catching this person on a felony? So as we know, he comes back and has a
30
felony
seconds.
conviction. When you have a felony conviction coming back down the road, guess what happens? The prosecutor has a bigger hammer. Okay, I don't need bigger hammers for these low-level offenses. And I would scrutinize those, and I would get people. I would empower the prosecutors to make decisions.
Thank you.
Same question to Moser.
Yep. So, Jonathan, Mr. Moser, even though there has been a decrease in violent crimes, the Pima County Attorney's Office continues to prosecute record number of cases year after year. Do you see a problem with this? And if so, how will you change that?
I absolutely see a problem with it. Yes, 100%. And I'll put my money where my mouth is. I sat in a meeting 10 months ago and watched as our prosecutors were suffering under these caseloads that were extraordinary. It was obvious throughout the office. I was chief criminal deputy. I sat in a meeting, bureau chiefs and supervisors were there, the county attorney was there, I believe the chief deputy county attorney was there, and I strongly advocated to stop that approach, to stop issuing so many personal possession of narcotic drug, dangerous drug cases. We didn't need to be doing that. I mean, I said it, and I was told that's not going to happen unless and until there's a different county attorney. So, you know, what I take away from that that's so meaningful is that the bureau chiefs and supervisors who were at that meeting have nearly all endorsed me. And the reason I find that exciting is because they believe in my vision for change. It's been up on my website since October. I don't currently run the county attorney's office, but if I do, we will treat drug addiction in a whole new way. I am not going to allow somebody who does not present a risk to the community to go to prison for being an addict. I think that that is an inhumanity that we have perpetrated on people. Think about this for a second. We would be absolutely appalled if people put in prison an alcoholic who was sitting in their living room drinking themselves to death, or for that matter, drinking themselves to death in the park. We simply don't penalize alcoholism in that manner. As an alcoholic addict, I see no distinction. Addiction is a disease. And we've been taking people with this disease and putting them into a prison system that personally I find appalling. And yes, I've sent dangerous people to prison. I do not defend our prison system. It must change. 97% of the people in prison receive no treatment or rehabilitation services. We send people to prison and we make them worse. We traumatize them at great expense to ourselves. And then we wonder why crime rates, are still beyond what we would want, right? I mean, even if the violent crime rate is falling, it's not falling fast enough by my mind. I want to actually get smart about fighting crime. And one of the things that's smart about fighting crime is fighting addiction intelligently with proven methods that cost half as much as prison and do twice as much good. So if you have a program we know works like DTAP, we need to scale it up. I've been working on scaling it up. When I start as county attorney, these programs will be implemented. I'm absolutely positively against the death penalty. Did I sign a death notice in a murder case involving a child serial killer? Yes, I did. Why? I argued against it. My boss made a decision I disagree with, and I won't be making those same decisions,
Time.
Period.
The next question, candidates will have,
No, go ahead, Neil.
candidates will have 1 minute each to answer, starting with Diebold.
Okay, Mark. You kind of touched on this. Will anyone in your office be allowed to pursue cash bail?
Pursue cash bail. So the answer is probably yes if someone is not qualified for release for whatever reasons the judge finds appropriate. If you're talking about in front of a judge, the defense attorney making a point, that the prosecutor making a recommendation. I've done the initial appearances hundreds of times. Okay. What I do is I evaluate the case in the time that I have.
30 seconds.
And I say, I have no recommendation, Judge, okay, on many, many of the cases. That is a signal to the judge, I think, that the person can be released without any cash bail whatsoever. There are certain types of cases where the victim is still in harm's way or still in danger, or the person could flee the next morning or is still under the influence of, horrible drugs. I don't know. There's so many different things that an overnight stay is not the worst thing for the person.
Time.
So,
Thank you. And Moser is next. Same question.
Jonathan, will anyone in your office be allowed to pursue cash bail?
So cash bail must end, period. Now that we need a legislative change to get rid of it, what we need is the only criteria for incarceration should be if somebody poses a community safety risk. The only reason I can't answer with a simple yes or no is that until we get that legislation, and we all know how frustrating it could be getting legislation here in Arizona, but until we get it, what about the murderer who poses serious risk to the community? I can't say I wouldn't seek cash bail if that's my only avenue. Now, there should be other avenues to hold on
30
what's
seconds.
called no bond. But what I find appalling is that here we are, how long has it been? 40 years since Ted Bundy posted bond, got out, and killed again. And we still have this same archaic system based on money. Being poor or being rich should have nothing to do with why you're in jail. And I will instruct my prosecutors that we're only seeking to hold someone in custody if they're dangerous, period.
Time. And Conover, same question.
Same question. Will anyone in your office be allowed to pursue cash bail?
No. We are going to make it so that if you are an ongoing danger to the community or a true flight risk, and in that you have the means to flee the country and escape prosecution, those are the only people that will be held in either no bond or impossible conditions to get out if the parties agree that they are an ongoing threat to the community. The difference is that this office writes the script for young prosecutors
30
on
seconds.
what to argue for. And Mr. Mosier, as criminal chief in November, was still asking for tiny minimal bonds on simple drug possession cases. I witnessed it in November, and thank Mr. Diebold for confirming that at the Pima County Democratic Party debate when he said, yes, indeed, there is a script. You write the script. They're deputy young prosecutors, and it will end under my watch.
Time.
May I address the script question?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Really quickly, Mr. DeBolt, could you address Conover?
Sorry, Moser, can I go or no?
No, because she mentioned Mark. She mentioned Mark as far as he confirmed some information about a script, and then so I'll go ahead and let you explain that, Jonathan.
So my recollection, we had a forum, that we asked. The question was asked: is there a script that the prosecutors follow during the bail situations, right? And is that like, here's a charge, ask for this amount. Here's a charge, ask for this amount. And Mr. Mosier indicated there was not, and I had to correct him to say that there actually is a book there. It's right on the table, and every prosecutor looks at it. You flip it open, you say, here's the charge, here's what you're supposed to ask, and you're supposed to follow it, okay? It's a script, it's there to follow it, and if you don't follow it, you can get called on the carpet
30
later.
seconds.
You can get called up to superior's office and say, why did you not follow the script that we've given you? We've already decided how these are to be handled, and why didn't you follow it? So there is a script. You're supposed to follow it. That's the rule. That's the policy. Follow the script. Ask for the amount, and it could be into the 50s, 100s, 200s, $500,000 bail request.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, John.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address this because this is very important because this, Mr. Diebold hasn't been paying attention. Ms. Conover tells this story. It's the origin story of why she's running for office. And she was in court, in Superior Court, and watched an attorney on a motion to modify conditions of release. That is not at the jail. That does not relate to the book Mr. Diebold is talking about. That book, I have nothing to do with writing. I don't provide any script. And in the courthouse, what is given to the covering attorney is coverage notes. As the chief criminal deputy, I have nothing to do with those notes. So it's a fable that there was a script in that room, and it is certainly a fable that I had anything to do with writing it. And that's important to me because the whole reason Ms. Conover says she's running for office is because of the script that I wrote that was read in court seeking bond on a non-dangerous defendant. And it sure wasn't my script. That's not how the office works. Now, do we need to change things? Yes, we do. And you've heard me say, I don't support keeping people in jail because they can't afford cash bail.
I think we're gonna have to go on. We're gonna have to move forward.
Okay. So we're at question 9.
Question 9. We got a couple.
Yeah.
more.
What time did we say? 2 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
2 minutes, and we're starting with Moser.
We're talking about sentencing, stacking charges. So stacking charges for those who don't know, the charges can ultimately stack at complaint level. So once someone has been charged, prosecutors are going to provide a plea, and prosecutors are going to say, hey, if you don't take the plea, what's going to happen is we're going to go ahead and ultimately it could be all up to 50 years of some sort. But if you take the plea, we'll go ahead and give you a lesser number of years. So do you have concerns with stacking charges? If so, what are they?
Absolutely, I have concerns. In fact, I've been out gathering signatures for the Second Chances Act, which is the one that my opponent mentioned Ms. Lawal driving up to argue against. So we don't share the same opinion on that. I have quite a different view. I believe that what we've got to do is stop seeing a prosecutor as always having the goal of seeking prison. And one way, if somebody goes on a spree of offenses, so they rob a bunch of Circle Ks, right? And at some point they're caught, and that is a dangerous crime. If they used a gun, it'll be 7 to 21 years. You don't need actually to have 15 counts of 7 to 21 years. There's a different sentencing scheme if it's non-dangerous, and it gets pretty complicated. But what can happen with this repetitive sentencing, repetitive offender type of sentencing that you're talking about, is that somebody who never had a law enforcement intervention, they never had a court intervention, a court case, a conviction, can be facing extraordinary amounts of prison time. And you're right, that can be used as leverage to obtain more prison than otherwise should be sought. We've got to get away from that whole model and that whole way of thinking. And instead, in every case, be thinking, how can this person participate meaningfully in our society, live with us, not present a risk, not rob the Circle K? That's where we want to get. And we can get there if we rethink the model of what we're doing. Prison is not the goal. Prison is horrific. We're getting ripped off by our prison system. So
30 seconds.
I agree with you, and I would be happy to work collaboratively with anybody in Pima County who wants to help lobby for that legislative change. Let's take another run at that. I was out gathering signatures 2 weekends ago for that very initiative.
Thank you.
Conover would be next. Same question. 2 minutes.
Same question. Do you have concerns with stacking charges? If so, what are they?
I have concerns that stacking charges and overcharging and the overuse of old priors, all of this is used as leverage over vulnerable people to force them into plea agreements that require more prison time than they should be going to prison for. This is part and parcel of the last 40 years. I'm concerned with all of it. It's not the way we should be running this office. And I think what concerns me over and over and over again is that while Mr. Moser talks about reform and talks about doing things completely differently than the way he's been doing it the last 15 years in that office, it concerns me deeply. Ms. Lawal chose him to be her criminal chief. She chose him as her heir apparent. She endorsed him and she's campaigning for him. And then she gave him the same team that elected her every 4 years for the last 24 years. It looks all the same to me. And so while I want to believe that Mr. Moser is a brand new convert to reform, I wish he had joined me 4 years ago. And, but he didn't. And so I'm here now.
And Debo, 2 minutes.
And Debo, yep. Do you have concerns with stacking charges? And if so, what are they?
I do have concerns. That's why I want the prosecutors to be empowered to do the right thing. Because you could get a guy with, we call it a spree. You know, he robs one place, next day he robs another. He's under the influence of drugs, he robs another place. So he's got 3 sets of armed robberies, 3 sets of kidnapping, 3 sets of aggravated assault with a weapon, right? If you took him to trial and stacked him on all those, the guy gets 60 years. Well, the same guy could commit an intentional murder and get 10 years if there were no other charges except the intentional murder. Is that fair? Hell no, it's not fair. Okay? That's why these individuals that we hire and we train and retain, good people from all parts of the community, come in and say, listen, do the right thing with this case. Do the right thing, okay? And we're not gonna stack a guy, we're not gonna have an undercover buy drugs from him, go back and buy drugs, go back and get 5 different counts of buying drugs and stack them up and send them to prison. And I'm not gonna send a guy to prison for 15.75 years for selling a little bit of heroin to an undercover cop when he's got 2 prior drug offenses. Not gonna happen. That's stacking charges. I don't like it, okay? It's not fair. There is inherent unfairness. I want to correct that and I want to do the right thing. Thanks.
Halisi, did this question have a second part? Or are we moving on?
Yes. Yes, it does. It does have a second part. I'm gonna,
okay, so 1 minute each for the second part.
This is in part why Arizona has the level of mass incarceration that it takes place, because just like Mark has said, that someone come up and then from robbing some store and charges it, and you get a lengthy sentence. And so there takes place within Arizona, and that initial crime, it may be what's considered a light sentence for less than a year if you have possession of some type of marijuana or some type of narcotic of some sort. The other area that kind of starts to hurt Arizona is the prior convictions. And so under your leadership, are you going to pursue those prior convictions, and so that ultimately people who have committed a crime get these longer, more extreme sentences?
And Moser first.
So I think that's a great point, is that we should not, again, seek lengthy prison sentences as a goal. We should only be seeking them when we believe we cannot protect community safety in any other way. So with respect to priors, I've actually been a person who has dropped not proven priors on specific occasions because I did not need the sentencing range that they provided to accomplish justice. And I will train every prosecutor in that office that the only thing you're there to do is make sure that you're serving your community by getting a just result. And prison, like I've said, is traumatic and horrific.
30 seconds.
So we really would like not to send people to a breeding ground for violence and racism. That's what our prisons are. I believe people should be in prison who present a serious, ongoing danger to the community. And by the way, let's reform the prison system. Let's agree to work on that as well. I also will have a rehabilitation reentry specialist working within my office with people getting out of prison, so we can give lower prison sentences where it's necessary and provide peer navigation.
Thank you.
And Conover is next.
I think the overall question, and I think all three candidates seem to agree here, the overall question and the overall driving factor has to be fairness. We don't want someone deprived of treatment for a drug addiction because they have an old prior. Just like we don't want people deprived of employment because of old priors as well. And so there's that base recognition that a felony conviction is damaging. And that's where we have to start the discussion every time, is remembering that a felony conviction lives with you forever and it's damaging. I think all three candidates too appear to be, Mr. Diebel always has, I think Mr. Mosier is joining, that these prosecutors need discretion to go after justice in the result or in prison time. And stacking up priors is the same problem as stacking up charges. Thank you.
And Diebold, same question.
Will the Pima County Attorney pursue those priors and stack them in that manner?
So priors can be very powerful and very hurtful to a defendant, very damaging, I should say. So if you have 2 drug priors, and first of all, a prosecutor is a minister of justice. We're not here to seek convictions. We're here to seek justice. I would give great discretion, great empowerment, and great training to the young prosecutors who are handling these cases and say, do the right thing in these cases. For example, you got a guy with 2 priors. Well, look at what the priors are. When were the priors? What were the penalties for the prior felony convictions? We have that information. Okay, you look it up, flip to and see what the charge of the day is, or what he's potentially charged,
30
and make
seconds.
a decision. If he's got 2 prior drug offenses, he's got another drug offense, he's not going to jail or prison. If he has 2 prior drug offenses and something more serious, then you have to give that some consideration. But I have so many times, over and over again, people I deal with, they seem like all of them have prior felony convictions. Not from me particularly, but just in general over time. So you have to take in consideration, what have they done? Have they learned from it? What are the priors for? Is the current offense,
Time.
victim offense.
Thank you.
The next question, each candidate will have 1 minute each to answer, starting with Conover.
This one is going to refer to the death penalty. Thoughts on the death penalty? The real...
1 minute?
No.
Yeah.
I am on record since the 90s with they were called the Coalition of Arizonas to Abolish the Death Penalty. I am on record against the death penalty here in Arizona since the 90s, and I'm proud to say it will be over. It will be over as of my first day in office. There is a huge distinction here that's really, really important to articulate. Under Ms. Lawal, to her credit, these last many years, if on integrity or religious grounds or other objections, you did not want to prosecute the death penalty, you didn't have to. And Mr. Diebold is one of those prosecutors sitting there right now. You could object and you didn't have to run a death penalty case. But this is Mr. Mosier's signature right here in February, 6 months before he filed for office. You know, facts matter. He says he's suddenly against the death penalty now, but he was prosecuting them as an officer in court.
I apologize. I think I missed giving you 30 seconds. Diebold is next. Same question.
So yeah, the death penalty. Give us your position on it.
No problem. I got 1 minute. I'm against the death penalty. So here's the problem with the death penalty. It takes too long. It costs too much money. There's no closure, no real closure for the victims because it could take, the case can carry on 25, 30 years. Okay. Just while the person is waiting his ultimate result through appeals process. The biggest reason they, at some point in the world, they wanted the death penalty because they wanted it to be a deterrent. Yet there's no proof that imposing the death penalty is a deterrent to any crime whatsoever.
30 seconds.
So if we don't have a deterrent, it's costing millions of dollars. It's taken 30 years to maybe to resolve a case, and there's no closure for the victims. And why are we doing it?
Thank you.
And Moser, same question.
Same question.
I am absolutely against the death penalty and will not seek it. The death penalty inflicts torture on victim families. The cases drag on for an average of 20 years on appeal. They cost millions of dollars more, even taking into account the cost of natural life in prison. They still cost millions more per case. And actually, the fact is that the murder rate is lower in states without the death penalty. So quite to the contrary, it's not a deterrent. The interesting thing about the death notice that was held up, let's be very clear.
30 seconds.
Isabel Celis and Maribel Gonzalez were two little girls of color who were murdered in Tucson. And I put the extremely complicated case against them together and brought it forward to the office. And my boss insisted that it be a death penalty case. That case should not be a death penalty case. Absolutely not. I argued against it and was instructed that we would seek the death penalty. If I'm elected, we certainly won't be doing that.
That kind of leads me into my second question is, have you sought it or have you declined to argue against it? That, Mr. Moser, you said you sought it, you filed it to seek the death penalty. Do you want to, when was the most recent time?
The one that the death notice for the Isabel Celis and Maribel Gonzalez murder case, a child serial killer, where I was instructed to seek the death penalty, was in February of 2019, I believe. The documents were just held up right there. So a little over a year ago, I disagreed with that decision at the time strongly for a lot of reasons. That case, that should not be a death penalty case. And you don't take a highly complex case like that and seek the death penalty. So I argued against it at the time, and we will take a different approach if I'm elected.
30 seconds.
I've never argued a death case to a jury. One other time there was a murder in Ajo where a young man brutally raped and used a hatchet to kill a 7-year-old girl. I was briefly assigned to that case. The death penalty was sought. I have never been part of the resolution of any death penalty case. And if I'm elected, we're not going to be seeking the death penalty in Pima County.
Time.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to you, Mark, and then I'm gonna go to you, Laura. Have you sought the death penalty, or declined against it if you have been a defense attorney, declined to argue against it? Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna let Mark go.
Okay. I think I got the information. I've never taken a death penalty to trial. I don't want to take a death penalty trial. I don't want to sit there with 2 defense attorneys, 3 prosecutors, 4 to 6 weeks in trial, hundreds of witnesses, hundreds of motions. I don't want to do it. I don't think it's worth the time, the money. I know someone said it doesn't matter the factors, it's just wrong. Someone said, I read that, I get that, but I have to kind of lay out some other factors as well. And that is the money spent on it, the time spent on it, the appeal process, which is about 30 years long.
30 seconds.
For Frank Jarvis Atwood. So no, I haven't never taken one to trial. All I have to say is I don't want a death penalty case, and I don't get one. So apparently it doesn't work for everyone.
And Laura, have you declined to argue against one? I guess that would be for you.
In all fairness to my opponents, I've not been in a position where I would have to make that decision. I also declined to work on death penalty cases from a defense perspective as well. My connection to the issue goes back to the 90s here in Tucson. There were 2 or 3 prosecutors locally who were disbarred for prosecutorial misconduct, and at the same time, there were 2 or 3 men coming off of death row, wrongfully convicted up in Maricopa County. And that was it was formative for me in the 90s. It was eye-opening, and it drove me into college and into internships and into law school. It had a profound impact on me.
Thank you. All right, death penalty. So sentencing. Now we're talking about post-conviction relief. How can people if there is some type of failure within their case, that they try to seek some retribution so they can get out. Maybe there was some evidence that wasn't at the time. So the question here is, if elected, how will your office prioritize cases being brought for post-conviction relief? What policies, organizational resources, commitment for timely, systematic review of cases? So how will your office handle those?
Alicia, can we take 1 minute each for this? 1 minute for each candidate? Or do we
go
want
ahead,
longer?
I know we're on a time crunch here. And I'm sorry, Neil, I probably cut you off.
No. I was asking you, can we take 1 minute for each candidate to answer this?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And D-Bolt is first.
Do you need me to repeat the question, Mark?
Just in a short form, if you could.
Yeah. How will your office prioritize cases brought for post-conviction relief?
Anytime a post-conviction relief is filed, we handle it in our office. Okay, it's a part of our responsibilities. We have to look at it, see if the guy was fairly convicted, fairly sentenced, got due process, and depending on what his issue is, we there's a variety of factors that go into it. Every trial prosecutor gets the Rule 32 post-conviction relief petitions on a regular basis.
30 seconds.
And that's part of the responsibilities of that prosecutor to research it, look it up, do a response, and file it with the court.
And Moser would be next.
Okay, Jonathan, if elected, how will your office prioritize cases brought for post-conviction relief? Looking at
I believe that what we're really talking about here is the need for a robust conviction integrity unit. Mark described the fact that we do indeed have post-conviction relief proceedings in our cases, and we handle those. But I believe the question is being asked, all right, but what are you going to do to make sure that justice is done in cases where you've obtained a conviction and now there's some new evidence? We have to have a robust conviction integrity unit. It's great that we have one of maybe a couple dozen in the country. So that is something to be proud of here in Pima
30
County.
seconds.
We have a conviction integrity unit, and the person running the conviction integrity unit reaches out to innocence projects as well as public defense services and says, please bring me any case where you think there's been an injustice. So far, we haven't identified a wrongful conviction, but we have corrected sentences that are disproportionate. And I think that's a great thing to be doing. I would promote and encourage the conviction integrity unit to be expanded so that it has at least one and maybe two full-time attorneys working on things like adjusting sentences like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Conover, same question.
If elected.
So as I mentioned earlier, a conviction integrity unit has two parts. We definitely need to be looking for wrongful convictions. A wrongful conviction is a horrifying trauma, but we need to expand it further, and it needs to have that second half. There is a unit currently in the Pima County Attorney's Office. It's a one-man unit. I've interviewed him extensively on his unit, and he has brought 2 cases forward where all parties agree that the person was sentenced to way too much time years ago, and that wrong has been corrected. Of course, we all know, right, that 2 cases is not enough. 60 people in a drug court is not enough. So yes, obviously expansion upon that is incredible. Also conflict, right? You got to bring in a neutral innocence attorney from outside. We can't have people judging whether their own best friend next door screwed up a case, right? We won't get anywhere there. We got to bring.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more question before we kind of get to some of the audience questions. Take too many of. I do want to ask this with this. So after obviously after sentencing, people and trying to find a job, trying to find employment, trying to find housing, and in all these areas become difficult. Will you lobby for full once the and just so everyone knows, they're not present. They're not present there. Expungements, and so will be to have expungements available to remove those items from your record, or so they're not visible.
And so this will be 1 minute each, with Moser answering first.
I don't know if everyone else is getting the breakup on I'm not hearing the questions very well, but I think I know that the question is about basically rehabilitation, reentry, and expungement. And what I will say is that like the prison system, which I consider to be in some ways pretty despicable, I think we also have been weighing people down with an inability to get on with a productive life, which is counterproductive if what you want to do is fight crime. So we got to get away from this old mentality. So I support set-asides when appropriate. I support automatic restoration of all rights other than gun rights for the dangerous. But, you know, with those type of appropriate limitations, I'll be lobbying the legislature for that change. Absolutely. And not only that, but I'm the one candidate that's spoken to the fact that I do intend to hire within the county attorney's office without seeking any more money, because we can save money elsewhere and create a position for a rehabilitation reentry specialist so that we can seek less prison time and have somebody who can peer navigate and help somebody live a productive life when they get out of prison. That's what we all want. And I mean, we also want to send fewer people to prison.
Conover is next.
So thank you for that, Jonathan. And so if audience, you guys couldn't hear me, I was referring to expungements, trying to get those removed so that when people get out of prison, they try to find a job, and it makes it a little bit easier to get back on your feet.
Neil, is this 1 minute?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. I fully support expungement, full stop. Living with a felony conviction is destabilizing for life, and it's a 2-generation problem, because when children are growing up in a home and their breadwinner, their employment is destabilized for life, it's a 2-generation problem. I'm going to need to bring in a lot of expert help to help reframe this office after 40 years, but not on this issue. Because I think I am a reentry specialist. In the last 5 years of my private practice, I was working with large construction and fiber optics companies to help them hire people coming out of prison and getting them back in the workforce. By felonizing our community, we cut our community off at the knees, and we actually separate employers from really high-skilled labor. Not on my watch. I'm gonna have a lot of joy in working on those issues.
Thank you. And
Debo, the same question.
Yeah, Debo, will you lobby for full expungement records once the terms of the sentence have been completed?
That's the first time I heard the question, but I would support for expungements, yes. Not just because you were breaking up a few times, but yes, expungement, set-asides, sealing of records, removing old low-level warrants from people's past. I mean, there's a program with the University of Arizona School of Law that allows a person to go in and seek some help, and to come in and set aside, restore rights, get your voting rights back. It's all very, very, very important. The only issue I sometimes have is the gun rights, depending on the offenses that were committed. So that would be a case-by-case analysis. Thanks.
Okay. So it looks like we're at the maximum time. Do we want to just go ahead and do one question from the audience? Can I get some, like, a thumbs up of some sort, or the hands?
Alicia, would you like me to read a couple of the questions that came in through the chat? So here's one that touches on a subject we haven't spoken of tonight. Do any of you have a plan to reform the juvenile justice system? Kids today are charged with crimes for minor infractions that weren't previously charged as crimes, that do not warrant criminal charging, and that end up detrimentally impacting their futures, not to mention propelling them into the school to prison pipeline. And Neil, let us know who would go first and how much time.
Okay, it would be Conover first. Let's do 1 minute. See what you can do in 1 minute.
1 minute on juvenile justice reform.
Okay, 2 minutes. You've convinced me. 2 minutes for everyone, though, not just you.
Yes. No, of course. Okay, the school to prison pipeline remains real. We have decreased the juvenile detention center in population dramatically, and I applaud the commission that put that together. At the same time, racial disparity went up. We cannot abide that. We have to tackle that immediately. There was a commission in 2016 of high-level judges, attorneys, probation officers, and they came together to create a little book that would go in every school. And when an incident happened, they could turn to the incident name and they would be giving guidance on how to handle it in-house, how to handle it with the parents, to cut down on reporting to police what should be handled in-house. The county attorney's office backed away from that commission and the plan died on the vine. So as with anything, we've got to get a reformer in there who's present at the table and working to address these issues.
Thank you. And Debo, same question.
What was the question?
Deb, can you repeat the question?
Yes, I can, of course. Do any of you have a plan to reform the juvenile justice system? Kids today are charged with crimes for minor infractions that weren't previously charged as crimes, that do not warrant criminal charging and that end up detrimentally impacting their futures, not to mention propelling them into the school to prison pipeline.
Well, that's what we need to avoid. This is the most critical time of one of the most critical times of a young person's life when they first engage or encounter the criminal justice system. We have to be very delicate how we treat them. And I mentioned earlier about the mentoring programs that we have to expand upon, the coaching programs, the educational programs, and giving all these young people a break, and many, many, many breaks, because everyone makes mistakes, right? And especially young people make a lot of mistakes. And sometimes they don't learn as fast as they should. So I don't want these people, the young people, labeled with these problems for the rest of their life. And I would give great discretion to the juvenile prosecutors to make a decision based on all the information that person has: background, family, lack of education, leaving school early, bad peers, a variety of things, before they ever, first of all, before they ever send that underage person to adult court, unless it's mandatory by the legislature. But if it's discretionary, which we do have discretionary transfers, keep them at a big boy court, because that's where the problems are really going to have. Keep them in juvenile court and make really intelligent decisions about what's going to impact this young person for the rest of their life. So I'm in favor of it. I'm open to any great ideas that we can make positive changes and help the young people. I have two young children myself, a 7 and 10-year-old, and I realize how delicate they are and how important their lives are to all of our futures. Thank you.
And Moser, same question.
So I agree 100% that we need to make it so that educators are not calling police and ending up involving a kid in the criminal justice system, which can do irrevocable damage if it's not what's required. And so one of the things we've done well, and there was an acknowledgement of this, is that we've reduced the juvenile detention population from 400 to less than 40. Well, that's great, but we need to do more than that. We need to prevent kids from getting involved with crime before the crime happens. And how would we do that? We need to use lessons we've learned from successful programs we've got. One of those programs is called Community Justice Boards, and it's restorative in nature, not punitive, and it's based mostly on volunteers, so it doesn't cost a lot of money. Now, I think everyone watching this probably agrees it's pretty despicable that we spend the most on prisons and the least on education nationwide. So there's a working theory I have that poor and minorities suffer the most from this, and that if we took the community justice boards and had an intervention earlier with a kid when they go to what's called alternative to suspension programming, which really provides very little in the way of programming or perhaps none at all. And I believe that what happens is if you're a rich kid in the foothills, you probably can somehow parachute out of some of the trouble you're getting into in school. But if you're a poor kid, perhaps, from a minority neighborhood, you're going to end up disproportionately in these alternative to suspension programs, and they don't provide any programming. So I've got a lot of endorsements from educators because I've been talking to them about this. Look at Mosier2020.com. You'll see a whole host of educators who have endorsed. And the reason is because we want to export this model into schools, and we can do it without relying on more funding because we frankly just don't get enough funding for schools in Arizona. So it's a promising way to really eradicate the school to prison pipeline. Thank you.
Do we have time for another question, Halisi, or is it time to wrap it up?
I think it's probably gonna be time to wrap it up.
Okay, because there's one really good question here that we have not touched on.
Go ahead.
There are a lot of good questions, but and I'm not exactly sure that this number is correct. It came from the audience. We can fact check it later, but 20% of the 1,960 people in Pima County Jail were released in less than a month due to COVID. Why was this not an option pre-COVID? Everybody wants to answer that. You tell them, Neil.
Yeah, let's see who went first. Conover went first last time, so are we going to do this?
Yep.
D-Bolt goes first this time. We'll take 2 minutes again.
Hi. You know, COVID has changed everything. We've never seen anything like it. It's incredibly horrifying situation. And I was asking the question, why did it take a worldwide issue of this nature for us to figure out a way to release people from jail? And it's changed every other way we look at life itself. So as horrible as it is, I think it's an opportunity for us to learn some things. How can we do things different? How can we interact with our fellow man differently from now on? How can we run the criminal justice system differently? Well, we can live with less people in jail. You know what else we can live with? Arresting less people to put in jail for low-level offenses, including drug offenses. We're learning a lot from this pandemic that we went through. We're learning a lot from the other issues that we're facing now as well. You know, the recent racial tension issues that we've all been acutely aware of, that's changing how we're doing and thinking about things, as it should. The pandemic is changing how we're thinking and doing about things. So let's embrace the idea of a change. Let's embrace the idea that we can do things different and we can still survive as a healthy nation if we all come together and work towards one goal. Thank you.
And Moser next. Same
right.
question, please.
So I'm so glad this was asked because I forgot to say this when I was talking about the meeting that happened about 10 months ago. Recall that we were everybody watching the criminal justice system in Tucson knew we had a deluge, a flood of these low-level narcotic drug, possession of dangerous drug type of cases, paraphernalia. And that was the meeting where I advocated, let's take a different approach. One example is TPD's deflection program. Wouldn't it be great if we had that county-wide, for example? Well, the way you can basically force that is you say, we're not charging them. And so the thing that happened with COVID is it showed that that policy, which I had proposed back 10 months before, actually works. And specifically, I love this question because it gets at the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge, which I've been a part of, including not only reduction of racial ethnic disparities, but also jail population reduction. And on jail population reduction, we were stuck at 1900 forever until we made this change. And the pandemic forced the office to get realistic about a change that was overdue and needed that I had advocated for. So it is, I get that people want to say that working in the office means you believe in everything that's been done, but it's actually not true. And
30 seconds.
I advocated for this reform. It works, and we'll do a lot more like it when I'm elected. For example, qualifying people for drug diversion programs again and again. We don't give up on them and send them to prison because at some point we say, well, you didn't get the message. That's never appropriate when all you're dealing with is possession of drugs. Thank you.
And Conover, same question, please.
I think for all of us who have been looking at criminal justice reform our whole lives, for a lot of us, there was this pull your hair out moment in March where all of a sudden everyone was asking the question, well, why are all these people in jail? Why are all these people in prison? And all of us, I think we're saying, we've been asking that question for years, but you take advantage of it, right? I mean, if people are paying attention now, then great, you know, we'll do it now. I think if COVID reminded us anything, it's that we're talking about humans. We are not talking about numbers, we are talking about lives. And when we look at that jail population reduction, I have no doubt it could have gone further and it should have gone further. It takes courage of leadership. In my role in federal court, and it took some begging and some pleading, but we're talking about the head federal prosecutor for the Trump administration. And those 8 agency leaders came together and we released 1,800 nonviolent migrants before the virus hit federal detention centers. And that was a bigger reduction than 20%. As soon as we were done with that, I gathered a group of experts. I would love to share that letter with you. And we immediately fired it off to Governor Ducey, and we said we have to do the same thing in the state prisons. Let us help you. Let us show you what we did in federal court, and let us help you in moving people out of the Department of Corrections as quickly as humanly possible in a meaningful way. People whose sentences are about to expire anyway, so that we keep inmates safe, and we keep corrections officers safe, and we keep public health officials coming in and out safe. The governor never responded, despite my impressive list of signatories. But you never give up. We never give up. This is the kind of leadership we deserve.
Time.
Okay, that was going to be the final question. So I do want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to give the candidates 30 seconds, final statements. Neil, who can?
Okay, it would be Moser first.
I just want to thank you all for being here tonight, taking an interest in these changes. I think the moderation has been amazing and professional. The questions are on point, and I really appreciate the dialogue. You know what I'm most excited about? No matter who wins, things are going to change, and they're going to change for the better. That's exciting. Real leadership will be implementing these changes, working collaboratively across party lines with police, with community members, and getting this work done. And I'm excited for it and excited for the future. So thank you all.
And Conover next.
I want to echo my thanks in particular on what was a horrible day following terrible months in a terrible year. Thank you for devoting the time. I want to work on trust. I want to build trust with you as a community. I came to this group first, and I'll keep coming back. It's extremely important to me. I want to hear from you. LauraConover.com, reach out to me, contact me. I have this big, beautiful team.
Time.
And I want you to join me.
And Diebold.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. The prosecutor has the responsibility of a minister of justice and not simply that of an advocate. We're not here just to merely seek convictions, but to actually seek justice. I've been doing that for many years now. I want to continue doing that. This is an incredibly different year that we're going through, and so many changes are happening. And I would like to keep that wave going till we continue to change the criminal justice system. Thanks.
Thank you. Matt, do you want to talk about
Yes. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you very much to the candidates for coming out this evening. I hope this event was informative. I hope we all walk away from this learning something new. This fight for injustice is an ongoing thing. We need to stop normalizing stuff like this, and we need to fight and let our voices be known. We're looking for volunteers. I also want to apologize for the technical difficulties we're having earlier. We're looking for volunteers. If you want to join the movement, please go to www.masslibaz.org. We need every volunteers to come forward and join us in this fight. And I hope everybody has a safe evening and God bless. Oh, also, I want to thank my team, the Mass Lib team, greatest bunch of people I ever worked for. Please raise your hands, guys. Let them see you. We're putting this together and making it happen.